Hi everyone, my name is Emma Barron, and I will be covering the social and ecological consequences of pollution and toxicants while incorporating important environmental sociology theories from class lectures, peer-reviewed journals, and the textbooks. My partner for this project is Sam Cornick. To start, let's define our terms. Pollutants are substances that cause harm or discomfort to the environment or living organisms. These can be physical, chemical, or biological agents that disrupt natural systems. Toxicants are toxic substances that can cause harmful effects on organisms, often at very low concentrations. These include chemicals, heavy metals, and biological toxins that damage ecosystems and human health. While pollution is often framed as a scientific or technical issue, it's deeply rooted in society. It affects communities in unequal ways, and it often reflects patterns of power, privilege, and inequality. In this presentation, we'll begin with the theories that help us understand these systems, examine the human and ecological costs, and then look closely at case studies like the Flint water crisis and the Deepwater Horizon oil spill to see how these concepts play out in real-world disasters. We'll wrap up by exploring ways to move forward through stronger policies, innovative solutions, and collective effort. Because addressing these issues is not just about learning, it's about creating a better future for all of us. To understand the sociological effects of pollution and toxicants, we must first consider the theories and systemic causes behind them. The question to ask is, why is this happening? When we think about pollution and toxic chemicals, it's easy to assume they affect everyone equally, but sociological theories show us that this is not the case. These harms are often the result of deeper social and political structures that create and maintain inequality. For example, conflict theory shows how those in positions of power tend to prioritize profits over people, which often result in polluting industries being placed near communities with the least resource and influence. The treadmill production explains how our economic system, especially under capitalism, pushes for constant growth, often at the expense of the environment and human health. The environmental justice theory points out that low-income and BIPOC communities are far more likely to live near sources of pollution, not by accident, but because of long-standing patterns of racism, underrepresentation, and disinvestment. This supports the idea of environmental privilege, which reminds us that while some communities are fighting for clean air and water, others enjoy access to green spaces and healthy environments, often because of their social and economic advantages. The risk society concept adds that modern life is full of new environmental dangers, many of which we don't fully understand until it is too late. Taken together, these theories show that pollution isn't just about bad luck or poor decisions, it's about how our systems are built. In places like Plakamata, India, for example, Coca-Cola's building plant contaminated local water sources, harming indigenous communities who had little power to fight back. This is one of many real-world examples of how neoliberal policies and corporate interests can exploit vulnerable populations. Toxic exposure, then, is as much a political and social issue as it is an environmental one. Now let's talk a little about social consequences that pollution can cause for a society. Pollution poses a major threat to the physical health of a population. Long-term exposure to certain types of air pollution have been shown to be directly related to the increase in chronic respiratory illnesses and several other life-threatening conditions. The effects don't stop at just physical problems, however. Pollution can also affect your psyche. Several studies have found that exposure to higher levels of air pollution can correlate with psychological and behavioral problems. Increased depression, anxiety, and certain types of dementia have all been shown to relate to exposure to pollution and certain toxicants. Pollution does not affect all communities proportionally. Minority communities are often located near sources of pollution such as dumps, highways, and prisons. Marginalized communities face higher pollution exposure levels due to systematic policies. Polluted environments tend to be more economically challenged as well. Minority communities often lack the same economic authority as their non-minority counterparts. Pollution does not simply occur in solely cities and industrialized places. Agriculture is also a major cause of air and water pollution. Farmers use chemical fertilizers and pesticides that leach into soils and lake groundwater. This can reduce farmland productivity. Along with social consequences, we also have ecological consequences. The question to ask here is, what is the impact of pollutants and toxicants on the environment? When we think about pollution, we usually imagine things like dirty rivers, smoggy air, or maybe plastic floating in the ocean. But the ecological consequences of pollution go way deeper, and they're often slow, invisible, and widespread. Let's start with water pollution. One of the biggest drivers of water pollution is agricultural runoff, as mentioned before. When fertilizers and pesticides wash off fields, they flow into rivers and lakes, triggering massive algae blooms. These blooms eventually die off and decompose, using up oxygen in the water and creating what we call dead zones, areas where almost nothing can survive. At the same time, we're also dealing with water scarcity, especially in places where water is both polluted and overused. Then there's the contamination of rivers and oceans by heavy metals and microplastics. These pollutants don't break down easily. Instead, they build up in fish and other animals, working their way up the food chain, and eventually they end up in us. Air pollution also plays a major role. Greenhouse gases from burning fossil fuels are accelerating climate change, which we're seeing in the form of more intense storms, droughts, and rising sea levels. But it's not just carbon dioxide. Emissions from factories and vehicles can also lead to acid rain, which damages forests, changes soil chemistry, and reduces biodiversity. Speaking of soil, there's another ecosystem being degraded. Toxic contaminants from agriculture and industry seep into farmland, reducing crop yields and making food less safe. And because of a bioaccumulation, these toxins often become more concentrated as they move up the food chain, putting both wildlife and humans at risk. All of this contributes to a loss of biodiversity. As habitats are destroyed or polluted, plants and animals struggle to survive. Species disappear, not always overnight, but slowly over time. This brings us to a key idea from Rob Nixon's work, Slow Violence. He argues that environmental destruction doesn't always look dramatic or sudden. Instead, it often plays out gradually, in ways that are hard to see and even harder to fix. And it usually hits the most vulnerable communities the hardest, those who already have the least power and fewest resources to adapt. So when we talk about pollution and its effects, we're not just talking about dirty air or water. We're talking about long-term harm to ecosystems, food security, and the health of entire communities. These consequences are deeply tied to the systems we live in, and like Slow Violence, they often go unnoticed until the damage is already done. The first real-world example of these consequences is known as the Flint water crisis in Flint, Michigan. In 2014, Flint's water source was switched to the Flint River, but the city didn't apply corrosion control. That caused lead from old pipes to contaminate the water. Residents saw and felt the effects almost immediately: discolored water, rashes, and other health issues. At least 12 people died from Legionnaire's disease linked to the water system. Despite this, government officials denied that there was a problem for over a year. This was more than a mistake. It was a systematic failure in infrastructure and oversight that ultimately destroyed public trust. From a sociological perspective, the Flint water crisis is a clear example of environmental inequality. Low-income and predominantly Black communities were disproportionately exposed to the contaminated water, reflecting deep racial and class divides in the environmental risk. The social construction of risk played a key role here. Officials minimized the problem, shaping public understanding and delaying intervention. The crisis also reflects the political economy of environmental harm. Cost-saving measures and rationing took priority over health, showing how economic decisions can drive environmental injustice. At the same time, we saw institutional failure. Governing bodies meant to protect people instead denied and deflected responsibility. As public trust eroded, especially in science and the government, grassroots mobilization became essential. Residents collected data, pressured leaders, and brought national attention to the issue. This case study shows how poor, inequality, and social action all play a big role in environmental disasters. The second case study we will talk about is the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. On April 20th, 2010, the oil platform named Deepwater Horizon suffered a blowout from one of the wells. This blowout led to a further explosion and deadly fire on the platform. For a little more background on why this happened, demands for energy have been rising drastically. The global use of fossil fuels has increased by over 250% in only 20 years. That has caused oil companies to race to produce fossil fuels cheaper and more efficiently, ultimately causing companies to place revenue over safety. During this race, companies like BP, who own Deepwater Horizon, also began to prioritize speed over safety. BP knowingly increased construction on the oil platform in order to meet corporate deadlines, and this further led to safety issues on the platform. Investigations performed by NOAA, or the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, revealed that the builders had used poor quality concrete and had installed faulty safety valves in the wells. An additional factor to consider was the overconfidence of the crew. Historically, the safety record on the Deepwater Horizon appeared to show a safe platform. This allowed the crew to have a false sense of security and safety. In 2017, 7 years after the oil spill, BP finally released the estimate for the cost of the oil spill at a staggering $61.6 billion. This total included government fines, cleanup efforts, legal fees, and many other fines and fees. To date, this is the most expensive oil spill in history. However, the damage did not stop at monetary value. The ecological impact of the spill is arguably more devastating. Over 134 million gallons of oil spilled into the Gulf of Mexico, which poisoned wildlife and harmed habitats. Countless species of birds, turtles, and fish were harmed in one way and another by this spill. And one of the most devastating consequences of the Deepwater Horizon accident were the 11 deaths on board. The explosion on the oil platform killed 11 BP workers, and the subsequent fires injured an additional 17. This case shows how the corporate greed and oversight can lead to decades-long cleanup efforts and numerous health problems for those involved. So now let's talk a little about what can be done to curb pollution. Laws and policies have historically played a major role in the reduction of pollution levels in the United States. The Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Acid Rain Program are all examples of laws and regulations passed by the U.S. government that have reduced harmful emissions. These policies have created limits that companies must follow and have helped to foster accountability within corporations. Another way to combat pollution is using technology. Green energy sources such as solar, hydroelectric, and wind help to reduce the world's reliance on fossil fuels. Simultaneously, advancements in recycling and waste management help minimize the amount of waste entering landfills and polluting the surrounding areas. Another powerful way to combat pollution is using community-backed efforts such as marches, protests, and grassroots movements. These can spread awareness on topics like pollution that many people are not completely in the know about. And lastly, there's you. Whether you are reducing your use of single-use plastics, conserving energy, or supporting eco-friendly businesses, you are able to make an impact on how pollution affects you. When enough people come together with a common goal like reducing pollution, it can produce ripple effects that may eventually lead to larger systematic shifts. To wrap up this presentation, let's go over some key factors about pollution and toxicants and the focus of environmental sociology. As we've seen, pollution and toxicants are more than isolated environmental incidents. They're rooted in social systems, policy decisions, and unequal power structures. From the lead-contaminated pipes in Flint to the deep-sea oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. These cases show how environmental harm often targets the most vulnerable, while corporations and governments evade accountability. Social theories, like environmental inequality, political economy, and the treadmill of production, help us understand the broader patterns. But we also saw that community resistance and grassroots actions can challenge these injustices. Moving forward, real change will require stronger policies, smarter technologies, and above all, collective political will. Environmental justice must be more than a goal. It must be a commitment to valuing all lives equally and to protecting the planet we all share. Here are references for this presentation, as well as a link to take a closer look at them. Thank you for listening.